What's going on, creators? Yeah, I just want to get on here and bring everybody back to now. Appreciate y'all being here and vibing with me for a bit. Yeah, today I'd like to talk a little bit about healing religious abuse and how you can start to really let go a lot of those programs, the indoctrination, and the things that just don't make sense in relationship with love. You know, ultimately, everything is about love. And God is love. And according to the Bible, perfect love casts out all fear. So any of these types of like shame-based ideas, these mental narratives that you're guilty, you should be punished because you're so guilty of things, that God rejects you, that you're separate from your Creator, that you're separate from all these things. That's a big red flag that the egoic consciousness is starting to creep in, and it creeps in religion just the same as anywhere else, but it almost can be more profound because there's an added authority given to people in like positions of like spiritual authority. It's like, well, they're close to God, and so what they're saying, it really has to get into alignment with what they're saying. But Satan knows scripture just as well as anybody, and so just because people are parroting things that are probably not being rightfully discerned, any of these types of things with attack and vengeance and guilt and shame and separation. I feel like Jesus came to abolish all of that. And I feel like that's a big part of like letting go of the old man, as the Bible would say, old woman, whatever, the old nature, is realizing that all of those ideas, all of those limiting beliefs, all those religious mental gymnastics that don't make any fucking sense, letting go of all of that and listening instead of the guide of the ego, or Satan, as is more probably appropriate for like a religious conversation, and listening to the Holy Spirit instead, which is within you. Jesus made it very clear, that the kingdom of God is within you, that the Spirit is within you, and that's your teacher, and that teacher is within you. And so I also feel like a big part of like Jesus's message is getting out of this idea of needing this external middleman out here, and really enlightening you to your direct connection that you have within to your Creator. And so whenever you start to, and I'm guilty of this, especially, I'd say most of my real reactiveness lately has to do with religious trauma, and just these ideas of hell and shame and guilt, and that you've been cast off, and like Jesus is the special person up here, and you're just some adopted stepkid down here that just wasn't good enough, but just because God feels sorry for you, then they'll throw you a bone type, all of this type of stuff, that these narratives, these stories of small-mindedness, and just is not reflective of being a child of God. And so and you can start to tell that in your own self by how that how these stories that you're telling yourself make you feel, especially if they bring a lot of guilt and shame. When it comes to the guilt, then next thing you could be doing nothing. It's like you could be just trying to do the loving thing, and some religious person can point their finger and be like, oh, do you really know the Lord? It's like, do you? It's like, why would you, I had an experience that was really troubling, in the past, where it's like, someone tragically died, and like the first reaction is, well, did they know the Lord? It's like, how the fuck does anybody know that? It's like, you don't know that. Just because someone speaks some magical words in front of you, then all of a sudden you're going to say, oh yeah, they're good now, and tell the grieving parents, that oh, their kid's in heaven for sure. And it's like, I believe that anything that you ask for in prayer, believe that you've received it as yours. And I pray for everybody that comes to my awareness that they'll all end up being saved by God. I don't have that kind of well, what if this is the bad person over here, and the special boys go over here, and just all of that kind of shit is just to me just retarded, and not reflective of love at all, and acceptance, and is satanic in my opinion, and so and there's plenty of people that would quote different Bible verses of why I'm wrong and they're correct, and it's like, I don't care. I've already proved it to my own self. I don't need to prove it to anybody else, because I could, with different Bible verses. One of which is like we're all one. That God condemns no one and leaves all judgment to the Son. Well, if you read in Paul's writings that Jesus Christ is within you unless you be reprobate. And so if the Son is within you, then who's doing the judging and condemning? And especially when you have this erroneous belief in separation, that you're separate from God in the here and now, which is the only time that's real in this life and the next, is the eternal now. So by most people, in the church especially, that think they need to die to connect with God, they're already spending the eternal now in separation, which is virtually hell, in fear and feeling separate from God. So it's like, this idea, a lot of these ideas that come, that are just fear-based, come with a worship of death, instead of a worship of God, which is, again, my opinion, but a lot of that has to do too, with your own personal walk with God. And like, I understand, don't forsake the gathering, of fellow believers, but it's like, are we really believing the same thing? Because I feel like a lot of like quote unquote Christian people are actually just Jews, that aren't even following or applying any of the teachings of Jesus, or even of Paul in the New Testament. It's just, oh, let's read the Old Testament and let's get back into the law again, where I got to do. I got to be righteous with my own works. I gotta obey this law perfectly, with my own efforting, and not trusting at all in the fact that Jesus already did the work, and that you are saved right now. You're good now. It's like there's only, when are you going to be good? Now? They ain't coming tomorrow. So it's like these beliefs, that I feel like are very traumatic, troubling, discouraging. You can look at it in many different ways. I don't feel like people in religion are necessarily like just evil, just trying to hurt you or anything, because so many of them have this delusion that, oh, by me pointing out the flaws in you, I'm helping you. It's like, I've been told I've been bad my whole fucking life. You're not helping me. It's like so many maybe religious people that have been indoctrinated into this ideology haven't had a lot of experience with just the toilet of society, and how that actually feels, and how it feels to be like abused and fucked up, and all this kind of shit. It's like, you're going to tell some dysfunctional person that was maybe abused by their parents physically and emotionally, maybe was bullied terribly, that, oh, you should feel guilt, you should feel shame, you should feel bad, you should feel like a sinner, you should feel like all these negative states of consciousness, and never showing anybody any type of actual love. It's like, using all of these Bible verses to justify attack and justify, well, it's when you see your brother sinning, you need to rebuke him, because I'm the righteous one. I get to rebuke people because there's nothing wrong with me. But it's like, the stuff that you're seeing in others is going on within you, and so it's like, I'm aware of, even in like the religious abuse kind of things, and just like the dramas and all that, so much is still just a reflection. Just like, you can look at different areas of your life and see what you're stewarding, and kind of using what has manifested to get an understanding of what's in consciousness, to start to then heal it, and decide to choose peace instead of just this conflict. How can I look at that and not be so triggered, and want to lash out on these people, or lash out on this institution, or lash out at this this interpretation. It's like all of that kind of stuff. It's like, if you aren't demonstrating love, then I could care less what your opinion is on anything. Because it's like, Jesus made it clear that you will know his followers by their love. And so if people aren't being loving, and they're being judgmental, and everything else, it's like, well, then you just don't fucking know. You're just unconsciously drifting. And when you see them, it's important to then start to work on forgiveness, because again, what you're seeing in others exists within you as well, because you have this story about it then too, so it's not just like this external event, which most of the time is neutral. A lot of times people aren't deliberately trying to tear you down, but if you get somebody that's so fucked up with their own stuff, it's like if they're drowning, they're not going to be the one that helps you do anything. But look at what's going on, and either leave the situation, accept it, or ask God. Most importantly, ask God, what's a different way to look at this. I can choose peace, so what's a peaceful interpretation for this, where I'm not just angry and just lashing out and just hoping vengeance comes on them next, where it's like hope they get theirs, I hope they get their karma and all this kind of stuff, where so many times, especially when you're dealing with like wounds of the spirit, where you're just like pain, there's like emotional pain towards like these kinds of people. It's important to revise that, or let it go, or forgive them, because they just don't know what they're doing. And that can be draining. That can be very tiring, actually. Just constantly being around people that don't know what they're doing, just walking around like children, or whatever. I wouldn't even say children, because at least children have good attitudes. But like, I mean, a lot of times when you deal with like adults that are just unconscious, it's just like dealing with demonic forces at times, and not to say that that's who they are, because we're all connected, but when experiencing some of these things, it's important to really step into your new identity in Christ, and not to be swayed. It's important to look at Jesus and Jesus's life. For example, when Satan was tempting Jesus with these different Bible verses, is one example of showing how the ego has an interpretation for Scripture, and is trying to use it to attack, to make guilt, to create shame, to do all the fear, all these types of things. And even like the verses on fearing God. It's like, if you look at like the Bible's own definition of perfect love, which is a definition of God, in my opinion, because God is love, many times is defined like that. But perfect love casts out all fear. But when it comes to like fearing God, for example, most of where I feel like that's important is getting away from a belief in two powers. Because as you move your attention to the oneness, those fears can be, because you already are afraid of God, and a lot of times that God is death, afraid of dying, it's like what you fear, what your attention on is really what you're worshiping. So it's like, and it has a tendency then to draw it close to you. So if you're fearing God, because you are already fearing God, whether you want to admit it or not, but like, just by that acknowledgement, that can draw God closer to you, and start working on healing some of these traumas, so that you can let go of those fears, so they can be cast out, and so you can experience more levels of love. And so it to me, it's a different way of looking at it. Where some people are like, you should be afraid all the time, because God's going to throw you in hell like a piece of shit. It's like, why have you had kids? Supposedly I'm God's offspring. I've raised kids. It's like, would I cast them into a lake of fire for eternity for what? Making mistakes? It's like, God's in control of everything, including the way you're thinking, the way these experiences are playing out. It's like, do you think God doesn't know what God's doing? It's God's pleasure to give you the kingdom. So it's like, wouldn't it be just as logical to go, it displease God to not? But it's again, it's these mental gymnastics, and these things that people just get. I've heard it so many times, I think it's true, but then they don't actually question where these beliefs are coming from. Most of the beliefs come from the world, which has time and time again shown to be unreliable and untrustworthy. And so a big part of like healing these traumas and these limiting beliefs and these assumptions when it comes to like religion, is to address them as they come up, And if there's a violent reactivity inside of your consciousness, realize, for one, that's not the correct guide, because that ego kind of consciousness, that satanic kind of vibe is trying to get you to align with the anger, because it's angry. It's trying to make you become one with it. So it's like you're tempted with these different beliefs and these different assumptions, and tempted to become one with that anger, become one with the wrath, with the murderous impulses, and I need to destroy that supposed other. And looking at that as a good time to go, okay, well, there's obviously a deep trauma here, because I'm very reactive. I'm, telling myself all these mental narratives that are just, intense and violent at times or whatever. And it's like, I can choose peace then. What does peace say about this? And wait for God to implant a new, an idea into your consciousness. You might get a couple, times where it's like, I choose peace, and then, your old beliefs and assumptions rear up again. But the more that you're able to be still and not become one with those energies, there's only really one energy, but it's like the hurt, the pain, all of that is a sign that you're out of alignment with the opinion of your creator, which has an opinion on things, which has a definitely a stance on things, it has a point of view. A lot of times it's easy to kind of feel like it's just you and your beliefs and your assumptions, but it's like coming into an alignment with your creator's beliefs and assumptions is important. It's a big move to the next level, is to realize that more and more so, and to realize that even the religion and everything is serving a function in creation, even if it seems to be dysfunctional. Like a lot of stuff in creation seems to on the surface be dysfunctional and not ideal. Ask God to show you, how does this serve awakening, instead of, how does this, how can I judge this, and how I get to destroy it and condemn it and start over. That's part of the programming of the world that you see at like the Great Reset, this idea that everything needs to be destroyed in the here and now so that we can build back better. It's like everything going on was the best that could have been done. And so we're going to destroy it and spend the eternal now destroying things, hurting each other, all this drama, all this fear, all this bullshit, so that in this utopian you made it moment, when we build it back better, it's like you can't even take care of what's already there. You're going to destroy all the time and just wipe it out. That kind of thought process comes from, I believe, a collective dysfunction. Who was his name? What do you call that? Oh, he's been pretty popular since the COVID shit and the mass formation psychosis, or just mass formation. Looking at how people have a tendency to get swept away in fear and hysteria, and you start to create a pendulum of consciousness that's destructive and irrational and childish and immature and all this kind of stuff. But you can point your finger at that and be like, oh, I just wish that was destroyed and gone. Or you can look at that as a call for love and an opportunity to try to extend love to it in just a minute way. If you can manage, this is not going from 0 to 100. So part of like accepting yourself, accepting the present moment, the here and now, is accepting where you're at. And if your mindset for however long has been abused and just traumatized, and you're just in attack mode all the time, wanting to keep yourself safe from danger by destroying any thing or person on the exterior that you're giving your authority to, it's a good time to try to choose peace instead of continuously being swept up in this consciousness. And if you can go from, having violent impulses, wanting to attack and destroy shit throughout the entire day, well, even having 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning that you've just managed to, that's where you're at, that's a move in the right direction, you know. So it's like, you know, everybody's got where they're at. I mean, there's people in prison that are just so in survival mode and just wanting to attack shit and just drama, you know. Even those people, you know, if you start getting out of that downward spiral, just one little baby step at a time, over the course of life, you know, you'd be amazed how far you can climb the vertical, um, you know, dimension of reality, by letting go a lot of the fears, facing the fears, letting them go, looking at like these different areas that have trauma that need healed. You know, look at your creator as a healer, not a punisher. You know, it's like these things that are popping up in your consciousness from the ego. You know, instead of trying to destroy the ego and you know, it's so bad and let's make it a, by resisting it, you build it up, you know, and by fighting it, you strengthen it and also become it. So it's like, look at it, you know, as an opportunity for God to heal, you know. Yeah, if there's religious programming, religious abuse, you know, things that, yeah, oh, this pastor is just makes me feel awful, or, you know, these religious people are just a bitch to be around, you know, just, whatever it is, you know, look at it as like, okay, I can sit here and keep these beliefs. These are the beliefs I'm with speech. You know, speech mirrors mind. So a lot of these are my own dramas. You know, not to say that they're real, but you know, this stuff I have to unpack and let go of. You know, but like when those kinds of stories start to come up in consciousness, it's important to like check it. Like, is that real? Is that a real belief, or am I just reliving a trauma over and over again? It's like, oh, you know, I just want to attack that person because they said something that made me feel like a certain way. Well, part of that is my own problem. You know, I put somebody on a pedestal and I gave some outside external thing power over my temple. You know, is power over my state of being. You know, I feel like a big part of like creation. You know, when you hear people talk about like co-creating, you know, it's like you have the external event, you know, that in many ways can just be looked at as neutral. But then you have the reactivity and the stories going on within yourself, which can be anything that you can choose to experience. You know, it's like there's always a better way to look at something. There's always a different way to look at it. You know, sometimes you look at what's going on maybe in your teenage years and be like, Jesus, I hate these motherfuckers, and I just hope they all whatever. Well, then as an adult, you can maybe self-reflect and go, oh, I get where they were coming from. You know, maybe you go through a life experience, maybe raising kids or something, and then it's like, oh, I see where we're coming from now that I've gone through some things, and realize too that, you know, we are not all different, you know. So if you lived the life of the supposed other, you would think and do the exact same thing. So it's easier to have a little bit more compassion towards people when you realize that, you know, if you live their life, you would come to the same conclusion they're at. You know, and not to get on this, oh, I'm right, you're wrong vibe, which is a big problem I feel like in my own self. You know, like, oh, you know, it's like, oh, well, you're wrong, you're in error, you're, you know, this, that kind of thing. Well, instead of like trying to be right, by making the other person wrong, you know, look more towards like, how can I get different? How can I understand that other person? You know, if I lived their life, I would do the same thing. So maybe there's some common ground. You know, what can I see in them that's maybe a step in a more loving direction? You know, it's one thing to, you know, oh, I'll die for you, you know, because I love you, even though you're like maybe a stranger or, you know, somebody I can't even stand to be around. You know, there's that level of things, but then there's also like the baby steps to get to that kind of level, you know, where it's like, okay, well, instead of like attacking you in my mind and hoping like something happens to you where you die or, you know, you get hurt and get punished for your misdeeds, you know, and by misdeeds I mean by making me feel a certain way. You know, looking at it more of like, okay, how can I maybe see the love in that person? You know, how can I maybe understand them better to change this mental narrative? Because it's all in the mental narrative that you're saying about that person. And, you know, once you realize then too that these inner world has a way of reflecting out into people, the circumstances of your life, these different levels of being human, all of this stuff. It's like you can curse people just as much as you can bless them. And I've experienced that firsthand, actually wishing harm on somebody and seeing that being manifested in that experience, and not only that, but then I had to then be involved, with the aftermath, and so it's like, wishing something bad for somebody else. It happens. Well, then their mother's crying, and in the same, and I'm dealing with the mother crying about it and feeling like, oh, that I may not have lifted a finger to make that happen, but it played out exactly as I imagined, and so instead of like crucifying people, is one way to look at that. When you curse people, think that you're cursing Jesus, because that's kind of what others are reflecting, and so it's like you can curse or bless. Both will, be, Jesus went to the cross, he, all these guys. I mean, that's something for you to unpack. But the more that you bless others, the more that blessing, because we're all one, we're all connected. It's like you're blessing a child of God that comes back to you because we're all connected. So it's something to think about. It's something to start moving towards, to kind of heal a lot of those like religious programming. I know a lot of people don't go to church because of the abusive kind of vibe, because of the toxic environment, and it's just like, and the unlovingness, it's just like, why would I want to listen to some fear porn all fucking Sunday, that has, oh, God is love, but I'm going to sit here and put you in fear for an hour and 15 minutes. It's like, well, you're supposed to be love informed, but you're being fear informed. So that's again, that's not ideal. And so, other than that, I just want to bring those ideas, hopefully help, get you thinking about letting go of some of that trauma, letting go of some of those kinds of things, and move more in the directions of healing. And so it's only ever now. So it's like, if that stuff is within you and you're not letting it go, you're not really processing it, maybe you don't go to church, maybe you're raised in church and it's just like, fuck that shit, and because there's so much negativity, and just for good reason, because of the abuse and the drama and everything else. If you're still hanging on to that, though, it has a tendency to keep your vibe low. And so healing that means forgiveness, which means letting go of the old narratives and the old baggage that you tell yourself that doesn't reflect love, and ultimately brings you down. And so, hopefully that helps. So, I appreciate you guys liking, sharing, subscribing, all the social networking things. I appreciate your spiritual support and your financial support. Thank you for that. And until the next now, God bless.